My name is Emily, and I'm 58 years old. I knew something was horribly wrong the moment I found my insurance envelope, the one with $90,000 inside, crumpled under my sister's couch like a piece of trash. But the real shock came later, when the bank pulled up a scanned image of the check and showed me my own forged signature on an account I never opened. My sister looked me straight in the eye and said, "Emily, you're imagining things." That was the moment I understood this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal so deep, so deliberate, that the only way to uncover the truth was to infiltrate the one place she never expected, her own bank. For most of my life, I've lived quietly, preferring the hum of my small garden and the gentle rhythm of my morning coffee over the noise and chaos my younger sister, Dani, always seemed to thrive on. We were never close, not in the way people imagine sisters should be. She was impulsive, dramatic, and often entangled in one financial mess or another. I was the steady one, the one who paid bills on time, who returned calls, who showed up. Still, despite the emotional distance between us, I felt a sort of obligatory loyalty. Family, I told myself, was still family, even when it exhausted you. When my husband passed away last year, that sense of duty seemed to tighten its grip. Grief has a strange way of turning the whole world dim, as if every thought echoes through a foggier version of your own mind. I was moving through that fog when the insurance company notified me that I was entitled to a payout, nearly $90,000. A life-changing amount, they said. Enough to help me get back on my feet. Enough to breathe again after months of drowning. The paperwork was tedious and emotionally draining. Every form reminded me of hospital rooms, signatures on documents I never wanted to understand, and the fragile quiet of the house after the funeral. Dinah, seeing how overwhelmed I was, offered to help by picking up my mail. She insisted she didn't want me to stress about anything unnecessary, that she'd sort through the envelopes and bring me only the things that needed immediate attention. I didn't question her. I didn't have the energy to. Weeks passed. The insurance company sent letters saying the claim was processing smoothly, and eventually that the check had been mailed. Dana was always the first to reassure me. "These things take time," she'd say with a soft, almost too sweet smile. "You don't want to rush them. It'll come when it comes." Something in her tone made a tiny knot form in my stomach, a knot I pushed aside because doubting my own sister felt cruel. But then one afternoon, while pruning my hydrangeas, my neighbor, Mrs. Cartwright, called out from her porch. She said she'd seen Dana opening my mailbox the other day. Twice, actually, while I wasn't home. I froze, pruning shears halfway in the air. My mailbox isn't locked, and technically, Donna did have my permission to check my mail. But something about the way Mrs. Cartwright's eyebrows pulled together told me this wasn't casual. It gnawed at me, but I brushed it off. Dana's been through enough, I reasoned. She wouldn't cross a line like that, not now. Not with everything I was carrying. A few days later, I found an envelope on my doorstep. It had the insurance company's logo stamped on the top corner. My breath caught, but the envelope was ripped, then sloppily taped back together as though someone had opened it in haste and tried to disguise the damage. The tear was jagged, the tape wrinkled. I held it up to the light, feeling a cold prickle down my arms. Inside wasn't the check. Instead, it was a printed statement confirming that the check had been delivered 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks. My vision blurred as I read and reread the line, hoping I had misinterpreted it. But no, the document was clear. My pulse thudded in my ears. The check was long overdue. The envelope had been tampered with, and Donna, sweet, concerned Donna, had been handling my mail this entire time. The pieces started falling into place with a sickening clarity. Her sudden enthusiasm about taking over my mail, her overly soothing reassurances, the nervous smile she'd give whenever I mentioned money, the fact that I hadn't actually seen any official mail myself in nearly a month, and now this ripped, taped envelope like a final mocking clue laid at my feet. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my own sister could take advantage of me at the lowest moment of my life. But the truth was staring me in the face, unavoidable and sharp. Dana had access to that check. She had access to all my mail, and she had every reason to intercept it. My knees felt weak as I lowered myself onto the porch step, the statement trembling in my hand. $90,000. Enough money to tempt someone already drowning in debt. enough money for someone like Dana to make a terrible, selfish decision. For several long minutes, I sat motionless, the cool afternoon breeze brushing against my face, while everything inside me felt like it was burning. I tried to come up with an innocent explanation, but every possibility disintegrated under the weight of that ripped envelope and my neighbor's offhand comment. Finally, a steady, cold determination settled into my chest. I needed answers. I needed the truth. And I wasn't going to get it sitting there on my porch. I stood up, gripping the statement tightly. I was going to confront Dana. And what she said next would leave me absolutely speechless. The moment I stepped out of my car and marched up Dana's walkway, I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat. I didn't bother knocking gently. I hammered on the door with the flat of my palm, fueled by a mixture of anger, fear, and a raw determination I hadn't felt since before my husband passed. When Dana finally opened the door, she looked startled, but only for a moment. Her expression shifted quickly into the familiar mask of faux concern. "Emily, what's wrong? You look upset." I pushed past her into the living room without answering. "Where is it?" My voice came out sharper than I expected. "Where's my insurance check?" Dana blinked, then let out a small, incredulous laugh. "What are you talking about? Emily, you're scaring me." "Don't play dumb," I snapped, turning to face her. "The insurance company told me it was delivered. I got a letter you clearly opened and taped back together, and Mrs. Cartwright saw you going through my mailbox." Dana's eyes narrowed only slightly, but enough to confirm what my gut already knew. She wasn't shocked. I was simply catching up to the truth. "Emily," she said slowly, "I think you're confused. You've been under so much stress since Henry died. It's understandable you'd misplace things. I didn't misplace a $90,000 check." My voice shook, and I certainly didn't tear open my own mail, tape it together, and pretend it hadn't arrived. She crossed her arms, defensive now. "Look, I've been trying to help you. I've been the only one helping you. You said yourself you weren't ready to handle all the paperwork." "I meant sorting bills," I snapped, "not intercepting money." As I spoke, something caught my eye on the kitchen counter behind her. Dana's purse. It was bulging, overstuffed, the zipper barely holding together, and it wasn't sitting the way a purse usually does. It looked heavy, awkward, as if something thick and rectangular had been shoved inside. My stomach tightened. "What's in your purse?" I asked quietly. Dana stiffened. "What? Why would you ask me that?" "Because it looks like something stuffed in there that shouldn't be." She stepped forward, blocking my line of sight. "Emily, this is exactly why I said you're not thinking clearly. You're letting your grief turn into paranoia." Something snapped inside me. "Don't you dare use Henry's death as an excuse to lie to me." Her face twisted, a flash of anger flaring in her eyes. "Well, maybe if you hadn't spent the last year drowning in self-pity and letting everything fall apart, someone had to step in." There it was, the bitterness she'd kept simmering beneath her sugary voice. I felt my jaw clench. "I want to search the house," I said. "Right now." Her reaction was instantaneous. Absolutely not. She moved in front of me, arms spread wide like she was guarding treasure. "You don't get to barge into my home accusing me of theft. I wouldn't have to if you weren't acting like you have something to hide." We stood inches apart, our childhood years of rivalry and resentment pulsing between us like a live wire. Dana's voice rose. "You always acted like you were better than me. You got the stable husband, the nice house, the responsible life. You don't understand what it's like for me. I never get a break, Emily. Never." "This isn't about your life," I said through clenched teeth. "This is about my money. Money you took." Her eyes flickered. And then, in a moment so revealing I'll never forget, she let out a frustrated sigh and muttered, "Even if I did find it, you can't handle that kind of money right now." The air left my lungs. I stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me?" She burst into justification mode immediately, waving her hands as if erasing her own words. "I mean, you're overwhelmed. You're emotional. I would never steal from you. But if the check ended up in my hands by accident, I would have just kept it safe until you were ready." "No," I said quietly, my voice trembling with fury. "You think you're entitled to manage it for me. You think you deserve control over my life." Dana's face paled. When I took out my phone and said the word police, her demeanor changed instantly. Her anger dissolved into panic. "Emily, wait, please. Let's not escalate this," she said. reaching out as though trying to hold on to the last thread of control. Let it go. Please, we can talk about this. I'll help you figure everything out. I stepped away from her touch. I'm done letting you help me. The room fell silent except for the tense sound of our breathing. As I turned to leave, something on the floor caught my attention, just a sliver of white peeking out from under the couch. I leaned down slowly. It was a crumpled envelope, the same type the insurance company used, and in that moment I knew the nightmare was only just beginning. When I got back home, the anger that had been fueling me on the drive slowly drained out of my body, leaving behind a trembling exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. My house felt colder than usual, too quiet, as though even the walls were holding their breath. I paced the living room for several minutes, replaying every second of the confrontation with Dana. The lies, the panic, the way she flinched when I mentioned the police, and that envelope under her couch, physical proof she couldn't talk her way out of. But I needed more than suspicion and a crumpled envelope. I needed undeniable evidence, something that couldn't be argued away, something she couldn't twist or distort. With shaking fingers, I picked up the phone and called the insurance company. After winding through the automated menu and waiting on hold, a representative finally answered. Her voice was gentle and patient, which only made the knot in my stomach tighten. I explained that I never received my check and that I suspected it may have been intercepted. "Let me take a look for you, Ms. Turner," she said. I could hear the clacking of keyboard keys through the receiver. "According to our system, the check was delivered 3 weeks ago, and it shows it was endorsed and deposited." My heart dropped. "Deposited?" I repeated. "Yes, ma'am. It cleared about 2 weeks ago." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "Can you read me the account number where it was deposited?" She hesitated. "I can, but please note this is only to verify if it's yours." I closed my eyes. "Go ahead." She read the number slowly, and the moment she finished, my stomach twisted. It wasn't mine, not even close. "That isn't my account," I said quietly. The representative exhaled softly, the tone shifting into sympathy. "In that case, Ms. Turner, you may be dealing with a fraudulent endorsement. You'll need to file an official report with both the bank and your local police department." My throat tightened. Of course I knew this was the next step, but hearing it out loud shattered something inside me. Fraud, police reports, investigations, all while I was still trying to figure out how to breathe in a world without my husband. When I hung up, the silence felt suffocating, but I forced myself to dial the next number. The bank. After being transferred twice, I reached a young man in their fraud department. I explained the situation as clearly as I could. "Unfortunately," he said, "we can't give you any information about the account that received the funds unless you file an official fraud claim. Once that's done, the investigation will proceed, but until then, our hands are tied." "But the check was in my name," I said. "I didn't authorize anyone else to deposit it. Doesn't that count for something?" "I'm truly sorry," he replied, "but without a formal report, I can't disclose any details." When the call ended, I sank onto the couch. My entire body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the cushions. A fraud report meant police involvement. Police involvement meant long processes, statements, possible court hearings. The last thing I wanted was to drag my grief through public scrutiny, but the alternative was letting Dana get away with stealing $90,000. I rubbed my temples, trying to think, trying to breathe. I needed a way to understand what she had done, how she deposited it, which account she used. If the signature truly matched the sloppy forgery on the back of her envelopes, I needed information, real information. And that's when a memory surfaced, uninvited but oddly sharp. Rachel, Dana's personal banker. Donna had bragged about her for years, about how Rachel helped her secure a loan she wasn't supposed to qualify for, how Rachel waived fees or gave advice, off the record. Donna relied on Rachel like an anchor. If I could talk to Rachel, if I could get someone inside the bank to help me understand what happened, maybe I wouldn't need a police report immediately. Maybe I could piece together the truth without launching a legal avalanche. But then another detail clicked into place. Just a few weeks earlier, Dana mentioned in passing that Rachel was leaving her position soon. She was moving out of state, maybe even changing careers. And her replacement? "Some new hire," Dana had shrugged. "They haven't picked them yet." A new hire, a vacant position, an empty desk inside the very bank where my stolen check had been deposited. My pulse quickened. If I was inside the bank, if I had access to the systems, the records, the scanned check images, I could see everything. Not illegally, not through someone sneaking me information, but legitimately, through a job. A crazy, impossible idea sparked inside me, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The bank needed someone. I needed answers. And for the first time in months, I felt the faintest flicker of control returning. I stood up slowly. If no one inside the bank would help me, then I would become the someone inside the bank. In that moment, with my husband's photo watching from the mantel, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to apply for that banking job myself. Walking into the bank for my interview felt surreal, as if I were watching myself play a role I hadn't rehearsed for. I'd dressed simply, pressed slacks, a soft blue blouse, and the pearl earrings Henry had given me on our 10th anniversary. I needed to look capable, composed, and just vulnerable enough to sell the story of a widow trying to rebuild her life. When the hiring manager, a kind woman named Teresa, shook my hand, she held it a moment longer than necessary. "I read your resume," she said warmly. "I'm very sorry for your loss." That simple sentence nearly cracked the facade I was working so hard to maintain, but I nodded gratefully. "I'm ready for a new chapter," I said. "I spent years managing administrative work at my husband's business. Now that he's gone, I need stability, a fresh start." Teresa's eyes softened. "Well, you have excellent experience, organization, client communication, record management. Those skills translate perfectly here. Let's talk." The interview unfolded more smoothly than I ever anticipated. My years handling Henry's office finances, filing tax documents, updating customer accounts, and managing daily operations suddenly worked in my favor. By the end of it, Teresa leaned back in her chair and smiled. "To be honest, Emily, we've been struggling to fill this position for weeks. You're exactly what we need. If you're willing, I'd like to bring you on board starting Monday." Monday. Just like that. I kept my breath steady. I'd be honored. By the time I walked out of the building, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and terror. The plan I had stumbled into out of desperation was becoming real, fast, and Dana had no idea. She still thought I was fragile, stumbling through grief, vulnerable enough to swallow her lies. She would never expect me to become the one person capable of exposing every detail of what she'd done. Training began with a whirlwind of introductions, dozens of new names, friendly faces, and the gentle condolences everyone offered when they learned I was a widow. I hadn't expected to connect with anyone, not after months of isolation. But there was something comforting about the quiet sympathy and the way people seemed genuinely eager to help me settle in. Eleanor from the front desk brought me tea on my first day of training, insisting that warmth is good for new beginnings. Mark from IT spent extra time showing me how to navigate the secure login portals. And during lunch breaks, a few coworkers sat with me, asking about Henry and sharing stories about their own losses. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But beneath the gentle camaraderie, another purpose pulsed like a quiet current. I was here to find my stolen check. Every lesson during training took on a double meaning. Check imaging wasn't just a system feature. It was my path to proof. Account histories weren't just data. They were breadcrumbs. The internal database wasn't a tool. It was a doorway. I paid attention to everything: how to search, how to filter, what raised security flags, what didn't. After a few days, I finally asked the question casually, careful, light, intentionally dull-sounding. If I wanted to check whether a client had worked with us before, how would I look up their account? My trainer demonstrated without hesitation. Just by name. But if you're not assigned to them, don't edit or click too deep, or the system logs it. She laughed. Not that you'll ever need to worry about that. Most people only look up accounts they're servicing. I nodded and smiled, but inside, my pulse quickened. That night, after most of the staff had gone home, I stayed behind under the pretense of finishing some onboarding modules. With caution guiding every movement, I typed in Dana's full name. There they were. 2 checking accounts, 1 savings, all under her profile. Seeing them on the screen sent a cold shock down my spine. My sister had deposited the check somewhere here. somewhere in these lines of data. But there was a problem. The system's deeper details, transaction images, endorsements, deposit slips, were locked, only accessible if a client requested service or if an employee was assigned to that client. My access level was too low. I'd expected obstacles, but the reality of them pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I needed to be careful. One wrong click could alert the system. One mistake could make Dana suspicious. I had to find another way. A few days later, during a slow afternoon, I overheard two coworkers chatting near the coffee station. One of them, a cheerful woman named Jen, laughed and said, "Oh, Dana Turner, she's always in and out of here. Constant financial emergencies. I swear she's keeping half the branch busy with her. Crises." I froze mid-sip. Of course. Dana was notorious here, and if she had financial emergencies, she would have needed money fast. $90,000 fast. The red flags were no longer subtle, they were blaring. That evening, during a routine system exercise, I noticed something, an account with initials eerily similar to mine, ET. But the number wasn't mine. It was a savings account with a recent large deposit flagged as unusual activity. My heart thudded. I clicked the preview, carefully, just enough to see the date. The deposit had been made the exact week my insurance check disappeared. And as the screen flickered, another realization hit me. Someone had funneled my money into an account that looked like mine, but wasn't. My breath caught as I hovered over the entry. I'd found the first concrete thread, and I knew pulling it would unravel everything. The next few days at the bank felt like walking a tightrope. Every step I took inside the system had to be measured, careful, almost surgical. One wrong click, one unusual search, and the internal security logs would flag my activity. I couldn't risk that, not when I was finally getting close to the truth. I kept my behavior predictable. I completed my tasks, asked normal questions, laughed politely in the break room, and made sure no one suspected that my real mission had nothing to do with customer service. All the while, that suspicious savings account with the familiar initials hovered in the back of my mind like a ghost. I needed real proof, not just account names, not just balances. I needed the actual scanned image of the check, the one with my name typed cleanly across the front, and whatever sloppy forgery Dana had scribbled on the back. To reach it without alerting anyone, I had to be clever. So, during a training session, when my supervisor asked if anyone wanted extra practice locating old deposits, I raised my hand. "I learn best by doing," I said gently, masking my tension with a widow's quiet perseverance. "Great," she smiled. "Pick a few sample accounts from the training list and run through the imaging steps. It'll help you get comfortable." This was the opportunity I needed. I started with the training accounts like everyone else. I clicked, scrolled, zoomed, and annotated. All perfectly normal. All perfectly safe. Then, when my supervisor stepped into a meeting, I opened a new tab in the system. My pulse throbbed as I typed Dana's name into the internal lookup field. Her profile popped up immediately, almost tauntingly. I navigated toward her secondary savings account, the one with the initials like mine, and the deposit flagged for unusual activity. My palms were damp as I hovered over the most recent transactions. There it was, a large deposit dated the same week my insurance check vanished. The transaction had a scanned image attached. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I clicked, careful not to open anything that would register as a modification, only a preview, a partial display, enough to see what I needed. The screen flickered, and then, there it was. The front of my insurance check appeared clear as day. My full name printed neatly, professionally. The amount, just shy of $90,000. The issuing company. Everything exactly as it should have been. I felt my throat tighten. Seeing the check in front of me, the actual check I'd waited months for, the check that was supposed to help me restart my life, it was almost too much. Then I clicked the small arrow to view the back. My vision tunneled. Someone had scrawled a signature, my signature, but horribly, glaringly wrong. The loops were too loose. My last name was misspelled just slightly, as though someone had copied it from memory rather than from something in front of them. It was clumsy. It was insulting. It was Dana. The reality of it struck me like a weight against my chest. My own sister had taken my check, forged my name, and deposited it into her account, an account disguised with initials resembling mine. She had done all of this while telling me she was helping. For a long moment, I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the screen, not just furious, not just heartbroken. Both. A twisted mixture of betrayal and vindication. I finally had proof, real proof, but having proof also meant acknowledging the depth of her betrayal. She didn't just steal money, she stole trust, stability, and the last bit of safety I had left after losing Henry. My hands trembled as I printed the scanned images. I felt like a criminal myself, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds to make sure no one walked by. Once the pages slid out of the printer, I tucked them beneath a stack of onboarding forms, then slipped away from my desk. Instead of taking the evidence home, where Dana could potentially find it, I hid the folder in my assigned locker in the employee room. Safe, quiet, untouchable. Now that I had the undeniable truth, I needed guidance on what to do next. And there was one person who could give it, the bank's fraud investigator, a man named Mr. Harlan, who visited our branch every Tuesday. When he arrived, I approached him carefully. "Do you have a moment?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. He looked up from his tablet. "Of course." I explained the situation in soft, measured words, the missing check, the forged signature, the suspicious account, the stolen deposit. His expression shifted from polite concern to professional seriousness. "Do you have the images?" he asked. I nodded. "Good," he said. "But listen carefully, Emily. If you want your money back, you need to let this play out. And it's going to get messy." In the days after speaking with Mr. Harlan, the fraud investigator, I found myself replaying his warning over and over again. If you want your money back, you need to let this play out. The words lingered like a weight in my chest. I finally had proof, undeniable proof, but that didn't mean I could simply confront Dana and take back what was mine. In fact, according to Mr. Harlan, confronting her was the worst thing I could do. "If she gets even a hint that you know for certain what she did," he'd said, leaning forward with a practiced seriousness, "she'll empty the account, move the money, maybe even close everything down. And once the money's in cash or transferred through multiple paths, it becomes nearly impossible to recover." The reality of it sank into my bones. I couldn't accuse her. Not yet. Not even when the evidence sang the truth. "The bank can freeze the funds," he added, "but not until a formal complaint is filed. And once you file it, everything happens quickly. Too quickly for her to react. But you need her to stay comfortable until then. Predictable, unaware. Comfortable, predictable, unaware." 3 words that felt like poison when I thought about applying them to Dana. Still, I nodded. "So what do I do?" His answer was simple and terrifying. "You make her think you're letting it go." And so I began crafting the role I needed to play. The next afternoon, I texted Dana. "Lunch tomorrow?" "I've been thinking, and I want to talk." She responded almost instantly. "Of course, I've been worried about you." The irony nearly made me laugh. I chose a small restaurant on the edge of town, public enough to keep her calm, quiet enough that I could control the tone of the conversation. When Dana arrived, she approached me with tentative warmth, as though she wasn't sure which version of me she was about to face, the furious sister from last week, or the grieving widow she preferred to manipulate. I forced a smile, gentle, apologetic, just brittle enough to look believable. "Dana, I'm sorry for how I reacted," I began the moment we sat down. "I've been confused, overwhelmed. Everything feels like a blur lately. Maybe I misunderstood the insurance mail. Maybe the check really did get lost or something." Her shoulders visibly relaxed, her eyes softened in false sympathy. "Emily, nobody blames you. You've been through so much. I just want to help you." I nodded, keeping my breathing steady. "I know, and I want to trust you. I really do." Dana reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her thumb brushing my knuckles like she was comforting me. I had to fight the urge to pull away. She didn't deserve to touch me. She didn't deserve to pretend she cared. "I've been thinking," I continued, withdrawing my hand gently. Maybe we should go to the bank together later this week, ask a few questions, make sure the check wasn't delivered to the wrong address or sent back by mistake. For a split second, barely a flicker, her eyes widened. Her lips parted just slightly, as though her breath had caught, and then she masked it with a warm smile. "Oh, well, sure," she stammered lightly. "If that's what you want. But it's probably unnecessary. These companies lose things all the time." I tilted my head. "Still, it would give me peace of mind." Dana hesitated. I watched her grip her napkin a little too tightly, then she finally nodded. "All right, later this week, we can do that." But the nervousness radiating from her was unmistakable. The way she kept smoothing her hair, the way she glanced at the restaurant entrance every few seconds, the way her leg bounced beneath the table. She was terrified. And that told me everything I needed to know. As we ordered our food, I stuck to the script. I kept my voice light. I asked about her work, her latest dating disaster, the silly neighbor who kept parking in her driveway. She talked at length, clearly eager to steer the conversation anywhere except finances. By the time dessert arrived, she seemed to relax. Just a little. Enough to let out a mildly strained laugh when the waiter accidentally brought the wrong check to our table. But then, as I excused myself to use the restroom, I caught sight of something that made my breath still in my chest. Donna had pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen in frantic bursts, texting someone, quickly, urgently, her face tight with worry. She kept glancing toward the hallway where I'd just walked. She thought I couldn't see her. She was wrong. I stepped back, quietly observing her, and in that moment I knew the trap was working. She was already scrambling, already panicking, already making mistakes, and she hadn't even taken me to the bank yet. The morning Dana and I were set to go to the bank, I forced myself to move slowly, deliberately, as though this day meant nothing more than a harmless errand. Inside, my nerves buzzed like frantic electricity, but on the outside, I kept my face soft and unguarded, clueless. Exactly what I needed Dana to believe. When I pulled into her driveway, she came out with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I noticed her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the passenger side door. "You ready?" I asked gently. "Of course," she said, her voice just a little too high. "Let's get this whole thing cleared up." She talked the entire drive, meaningless chatter, nervous giggles, exaggerated reassurances, but my mind was elsewhere, focused entirely on the next hour. As we pulled into the bank parking lot, she suddenly touched my arm. "Emily, you know," she said with a forced laugh. "There's really no need to speak to anyone. We can just check your online portal later. Maybe the company emailed something recently." I brushed her hand away lightly. "I'd rather speak to someone in person. I need clarity." Her smile stiffened, but she followed me inside. The lobby was quiet, filled with soft music and the sound of printers humming behind frosted glass walls. I walked forward slowly, pretending to scan the desks, pretending not to know exactly where I was. Heading. "Let's just grab someone at the front," Dana whispered urgently. "We don't need—" But I kept moving, straight toward Mr. Harlan's desk. Her breath hitched. "Emily, where are you going?" "Oh," I said lightly. "I remember this gentleman from last week when I opened my savings account. He was so kind. I'm sure he can help." Dana came to a full stop. Her eyes darted toward the exit, then to the tellers, then back to me. Sweat had formed along her hairline. Her lips parted slightly, panic shining behind her mascara. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Good morning, Emily," Mr. Harlan said warmly as he stood. "And this must be your sister." Dana tried to smile, but her face twitched. "Hi. Yes, I'm Dana. We're just here to clear up a misunderstanding." "Of course," he said, motioning for us to sit. "Why don't you both take a seat?" Dana perched on the edge of the chair like she was ready to sprint. I settled in calmly. "So," he began professionally, "Emily tells me she hasn't received an insurance check she was expecting, and that she's concerned it may have been deposited into the wrong account." Before I could open my mouth, Dana cut in sharply. "Right, yes, but she's been confused since her husband died. She's still grieving. Things have been misplaced. She's under a lot of stress." Her voice quivered, not with sadness, but with desperation. Mr. Harlan nodded politely, unfazed. "That's understandable. Emily, why don't you describe in your own words what happened?" I kept my voice steady, controlled. The insurance company told me the check was delivered and deposited weeks ago, but it never came to me, and my signature was forged. Forged? Dana repeated loudly, letting out an awkward laugh. Oh my God, Emily, really? You're accusing someone of forgery now? You can't just... Dana, I said calmly, please let me finish. Her eyes narrowed, but she fell silent. Mr. Harlan leaned forward. Emily, did you bring the documents we discussed? Dana whipped her head toward me. Documents? What documents? Yes, I said quietly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd hidden in my locker for days. I opened it slowly, deliberately, sliding out the printed images, the front of the check with my name, and the back, covered with that sloppy, misspelled attempt at my signature. Dana's face blanched. Her mouth fell open slightly, her breath coming out in shaky bursts. How did you... she whispered, the words strangled. I placed the papers gently on the desk. Mr. Harlan examined them with the careful eye of someone who'd seen far too many forged documents in his career. This signature is clearly not the same as the one on file, he confirmed, and this deposit went into a secondary savings account under your sister's name. Dana jerked in her seat, her voice cracking. This doesn't prove anything. You shouldn't even have access to this. You've broken into my life, my privacy. This is illegal. She is the one who should be reported. Her voice hit a shrill edge, drawing the attention of two tellers nearby. She was unraveling, fast. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just looked at her. Dana, I said, barely above a whisper, you stole from me. No, she shouted, standing a little too quickly. No, you don't understand what you're saying. You don't know what I've been dealing with. You don't know how hard things have been for me. I didn't have a choice. Mr. Harlan spoke firmly. Forging an endorsement is a serious federal offense, Ms. Turner, and depositing a check not made out to you is bank fraud. You could face... Dana shot to her feet, her chair screeching across the floor. Stop! She yelled, her voice cracking under the pressure. I did it because Emily forced me to. The moment Dana's outburst echoed through the branch, chaos rippled through the room. Customers turned, employees froze mid-task, and Mr. Harlan, calm but deadly serious, stood and motioned for a nearby manager. Close her accounts, he said quietly. Freeze everything. Dana's head whipped toward him. What? No, you can't do that. You can't. But the command was already being carried out. Within minutes, the fraudulent savings account, the one she'd used to stash my insurance money, was locked down. Every dollar remaining was secured. I watched her face as the realization hit her. Panic hollowed her eyes. Her breathing turned shallow and sharp. How much is left? I asked, though I already feared the answer. Mr. Harlan hesitated before responding. Less than half. Half. Nearly $50,000 gone. Spent. My stomach churned. Months of grief and paperwork, the last gift my husband had managed to leave me, evaporated under the decisions of a sister who claimed to love me. Dana was escorted to a private office for questioning. I remained outside with a teller who quietly offered me water, though my throat was too tight to swallow anything. I could hear muffled voices through the glass. Dana's frantic, rising and falling like a terrified child caught in a lie. When they called me in, Dana's eyes were wet, but not from remorse. No, these were tears of someone whose schemes were collapsing. Emily, she cried, reaching toward me as though I was her lifeline. Please listen to me. I only took the money because I was trying to protect you. I stared at her. Protect me? By stealing my check and forging my name? By spending money meant for my future? She sniffled loudly. You're fragile. You've been a mess since Henry died. I thought you'd make terrible decisions with that much money. I thought it would ruin you. I laughed, cold and humorless. And wasting it on your impulsive habits was the better option? Her face twisted. You don't understand how hard things have been for me. I'm drowning. Bills, creditors, everything piling up. I thought if I could just borrow some of it. You didn't borrow it, I snapped. You spent it, and you hid it, and you lied. Years of pent-up resentment loosened inside me. All the small manipulations, all the times she'd leaned on me emotionally or financially without giving anything back, they flooded my mind in a bitter rush. You've always taken from me, Dana. Time, energy, money, patience. And I let you, because I told myself sisters help each other. But all you've ever done is help yourself." Her jaw dropped. "That's not fair. You've always been the one with everything. A stable life, a husband who adored you, a home you didn't have to struggle for. I never had that, Emily." "And whose fault is that?" I asked, my voice shaking now, not with anger, but heartbreak. "You've sabotaged yourself at every turn, and now you've dragged me into your mess." She turned to Mr. Harlan, desperate. "I didn't mean to commit a crime. I didn't think it counted as fraud if we're family." His expression didn't soften. "Fraud is fraud. Family doesn't change the law." The bank initiated the formal process. Internal reports, escalation to the fraud department, preparation for a police referral. Every step felt unreal, like watching someone else's life crumble through a window. Dana kept pleading, first rageful, then apologetic, then pitiful. She claimed she'd been desperate, panicked, borrowing the money until she could pay it back. But even she couldn't maintain the illusion. She had no means to replace what she'd spent. Eventually, the manager and Mr. Harlan escorted her to a back office to wait for law enforcement. I sat outside in the quiet lobby, the hum of printers and soft background music, creating a surreal contrast to the emotional wreckage unfolding feet away. Grief twisted inside me. Grief not just for my stolen money or for my husband, but for the sister I realized I'd never truly known. Betrayal cut deeply, but alongside it was a strange, quiet relief. The burden wasn't on my shoulders anymore. The truth was out. The consequence no longer mine to enforce. Later that week, after the bank completed its reports, I expected the silence to settle, but instead, my phone rang late Thursday evening. The caller ID listed an unfamiliar number from the local precinct. When I answered, a stern but calm voice introduced himself as Detective Rowan. "Ms. Turner," he said, "your sister has made a statement. We need you to come to the station as soon as possible." I felt my breath catch. Whatever Dana had told them, it wasn't over yet. Walking into the police station felt strangely anticlimactic. After everything, the stolen check, the forged signature, the lies, the shame, the screaming in the bank, I expected the ending to be dramatic, loud, punishing. Instead, the building was quiet. A tired-looking officer led me down a short hallway to a small interview room where Detective Rowan waited with a stack of files. "Ms. Turner," he greeted, "thank you for coming. Please sit." I sat, folding my hands tightly in my lap. "You said my sister made a statement." He nodded, opening the folder. "She has confessed to intercepting the check, forging your endorsement, and depositing it into her account. She has also admitted to spending a portion of the funds." Hearing it spoken aloud, formally, unambiguously, felt surreal. A mix of vindication and sadness curled in my chest. Part of me had held on to some naive hope that there would be an explanation, a reason that made sense, but there never was. "What happens now?" I asked. "Given the cooperation she's shown," he said carefully, "and the evidence you provided, the district attorney is offering her reduced penalties in exchange for a full confession and a restitution plan." "Restitution?" He flipped to another page. "She'll be required to repay the remaining funds in installments, under court supervision. In addition, she will have to attend mandatory financial restitution hearings and comply with all monitoring requirements. If she fails to do so, the consequences become significantly more severe." I nodded slowly. It was justice, not the harsh, vengeful kind, but a structured, steady, undeniable justice that ensured the truth was acknowledged. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't rebuild what was broken between us. But it was something. He closed the file gently. "I know this has been painful, but in situations involving family, closure is complicated. You did the right thing." As I left the station, I felt the cool morning air brush against my face. I inhaled deeply, letting it settle something inside me. Vindication sat beside sorrow, not replacing it, but coexisting in a way I didn't expect. My relationship with Dana, whatever it had once been, was damaged beyond repair. I knew that now. But I also knew I had protected myself. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I had chosen myself. Over the next few weeks, the bank returned the remaining funds to my new account. Seeing that balance, reduced but finally mine, felt like reclaiming a part of my life that Dana had tried to steal. I used the money carefully. I paid off the lingering medical debt from my husband's final months. I settled a few home repairs I'd been putting off, and I placed the rest into a secure savings plan, something steady and responsible, exactly what Henry would have wanted. As I organized my finances, I found myself reflecting on the painful truth I'd been forced to face. Blood does not excuse betrayal. It never has. It never will. Family loyalty doesn't mean letting someone hurt you. Love doesn't mean allowing someone to take advantage of your grief. And trust, once broken, doesn't magically rebuild itself. But alongside that truth came something unexpected. Peace. Real, quiet peace. My job at the bank, which had started as a desperate plan, slowly became a real source of stability. I found myself enjoying the rhythm of the work, the structure, the problem solving, the little daily exchanges with customers. My coworkers became friends, real friends. We shared lunches, inside jokes, stories about life and loss. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, I regained confidence I thought grief had permanently taken from me. There were days when I still felt the weight of everything that had happened. The deception, the confrontation, the coldness of seeing my sister's signature on documents meant to help me start over. But there were also days when I felt something new blossoming, something like hope. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun dip behind, I thought about the long road from the moment I realized my checking to the moment justice was finally delivered. It wasn't the story I expected. It wasn't the ending I am, but it was an ending that affirmed something important. When no one else fights for you, you must fight for yourself. In the softness of the fading light, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it lazily until I saw the name on the screen, Dinah. For a long moment, I simply stared at it, the glow reflecting faintly against the wood. I didn't pick up. But as the call continued to ring, unending and persistent, I understood something very clearly. My story wasn't quite finished yet. In the end, reclaiming my stolen money wasn't just about finances. It was about reclaiming my voice after months of grief, confusion, and betrayal. Exposing the truth cost me the relationship with my sister, but it gave me back the peace she tried to take. My life is quieter now, steadier, and finally my own again. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And now I wonder, what would you have done if the person who betrayed you was someone you loved? Stories like mine remind us how fragile trust can be and how strong we become when we stand up for ourselves. If you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories of resilience and justice, staying connected here helps this community grow. Your voice matters, and it means more than you know. So stick around. There are plenty more stories waiting for you.